Hello, everyone. I'm Yasmin Taj, editor for ET World International and head of branded content for the Economic Times. And it is a pleasure to welcome you all to the third episode of the video interview series brought to you by ET World Southeast Asia in collaboration with Enparadigm on the theme Talent Management and Development for the Future of Work. While there can be several factors and concerns that influence the outlook of the global workforce today, a majority of employees still cherish the non-financial aspects of their jobs, and learning is one of their top priorities today. L&D and HR, therefore, need to be more integrated and strategic for transforming the talent that you currently have into the talent that you need. To understand how our leaders plan to build new superpowers to equip our top talent with the right skills for the future, and to explore some of the new and progressive trends that are driving the talent management function today, we have partnered with Enparadigm to host an exclusive video interview series on the topic Talent Management and Development for the Future of Work. And for today's exclusive episode, we are delighted to invite Ichsan Adiwijaya, who's CHRO at AIA Indonesia, and John Cherian, who's CEO of Enparadigm. Ichsan currently serves as the CHRO at AIA Indonesia, senior human capital executive with more than 25 years of experience, both as a CHRO in financial services, automotive and aviation industries, and also as director in global consulting firms like Accenture and Conferry. Ichsan, in his consulting and senior management roles, has been leading successful transformation projects, transforming organizations, people, and culture that bring positive and sustainable impact to the business. We also have with us John, who's CEO of Enparadigm, who is driven by the potential of purpose-driven business to make the world more meaningful. His endeavor to make the complex simple and his belief in the power of learning to make people and businesses better has been the significant driving force in the Enparadigm journey. So thank you so much for joining us, Ichsan and John. It's a pleasure to have you with us for this video interview.
My pleasure. Feeling is mutual. Nice to be here.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Thanks, John. So without further ado, let me invite both Ichsan and John to share their insights and views on today's topic. Ichsan, I'd like to come to you first. You have had a huge career span so far. So according to you, what are the top trends that will be driving the talent management and development function, especially this year and beyond?
Okay, thank you, Yasmin. I think it's interesting. I think in the past few years, I think the change has been quite significant, right? Especially after the pandemic, right? I think there are a couple of things that drive these changes and that would affect the talent management and development function. And number one, I think, is the technology changes, right? There are many technology disruptions that happen and being adopted by companies, both to accelerate their penetration in the market or growing new markets and products. But also, I think in the HR space, we're also seeing a plethora of technologies that we can leverage to basically enhance our capability for talent management and development. Things like, for example, analytics on our people, leveraging the data that we have to make sure we get more insights into our talents. And also, I think in the learning space, we also see a lot of different learning solutions that are available in the market that we can leverage, whether it be from the content perspective or from the platform perspective, right, to make the learning more bite-sized and more user-friendly. And the second part of this, and this is not unrelated to the first one, I think is of course, the proliferation of the hybrid work or the project work, right? There are more and more, I think, companies who are employing a hybrid working arrangements. But even if they are not doing hybrid work arrangements, projects, doing things through projects are more commonplace. So they need to be a lot of identification of the needs that occur from these projects in terms of the skill development and the talent required. So that kind of those two forces, I think, pushes talent development and talent management function to be at the next level.
Great thoughts, Ichsan. I think I totally agree with you that technology has been the greatest accelerator of growth in the past few years. And as you said, with newer workforce models coming into place, the kind of workforce we'll have and the kind of skills that will be required for that will kind of change the whole, learning ecosystem also. John, what are your thoughts? What trends have you been seeing in your experience of working with so many large organizations across the globe?
So we've all been hearing about the changes to workplace, and workforce. When it comes to the future of work, right? And across each of these dimensions, the question to the talent management and the talent development function is, how do we keep pace with these changes, right? So work has become definitely a lot more digital. We've seen that AI is coming up in a big way. And therefore, the way the people work, our employees and the rest of our workforce work, is definitely changing a lot, right? Secondly, like Ichsan mentioned, the workplace has become hybrid. And thirdly, the workforce itself has become a lot more flexible, right? So we've been used to having full-time employees on roles who do a majority of the company's value addition to its customers. But now we are seeing a world where increasingly that world is changing, right? It's no longer about your full-time workforce, but there are many different kind of flexible and talent models, which is changing the way work gets delivered for the customer. So the question to the talent management function is, how do we keep pace with all these changes? Therefore, what is it that we should do to ensure that all the people who are actually delivering value to the customer, how are they enabled and how can they stay a step ahead of the game?
Interesting point, John. I'd like to catch on to the phrase when you said that, how do we keep pace to the changes? I think the kind of challenges that have come up, because the changes have been so rampant and it has happened so quickly that a lot of organizations had to adapt also very, very quickly to that. So Ichsan, I'll come to you again. What challenges have you seen in the talent management and development function in the past few years? And how do you think our leaders navigating through it, or how can they navigate better through these challenges?
Yes, I think I'd like to allude to what John said earlier, right? I think the demand from the business, I think, gets quite demanding, right? There's a lot of changes that are happening in the industry, and that forces companies to also, develop strategies and tactics that are quite flexible. And that also that means that puts a lot of pressure on HR function, especially in the talent management development, to make sure that we have the right people with the right skills ready, right? And then this means that, you need to also prepare, right? That you have enough insights into your talent pool, whether it be inside the organization or maybe right now it's outside of the organization, in terms of the skills that you need, right? And then how do you then make sure that you can mobilize those skills into the right place to make sure that the organization can execute their strategies. Now, I think that compounds, the issue with the hybrid workforce. I think the other part of it, and I've said this in the earlier interview, is in terms of the company culture. It's more challenging right now for HR in terms of how we infuse the corporate culture into a hybrid and diverse workforce in different locations. People can affiliate themselves to the purpose of the company, but then in terms of how you get collaboration and true collaboration across different teams, those are, I think, one of the main challenges. Because when you talk about talent management and development, I think one of the important part is you have to bake in a good employee experience throughout the talent journey, so that you can actually retain them, these talents in long enough for them to add value to the company.
I agree, Ichsan. I think the fact that we have a hybrid work model, a contingent workforce, different generations working from different locations, anytime, anywhere. The whole point that you said about integration about bringing them together on one common culture. How do you create that kind of a common culture? How do you integrate that? How do you build collaboration? While data can help you build analytics into what is required, but how do you create that one culture is going to be very important. John, what are your thoughts? What challenges do you think are going to be most rampant this year, especially? And do you kind of echo what Ichsan is saying about, bringing them together when you're working in a hybrid mode?
Yeah, so I think life has become a lot more difficult for business and HR leaders in this agenda, right? How do you keep the workforce coherent? How do you keep them cohesive? And how do you keep them infused to the sense of purpose? I think these are far more challenging today than they were maybe 5 or 10 or 15 years back. There are changes in the generational workforce. You see that Gen X as a generation is moving out with every year. And with every year, you have more and more Gen Z people today coming in, right? And we have Gen Y in the middle. And all these generations are very different. I don't want to stereotype, but at the same time, you can definitely see patterns and trends in terms of, how these different generations look at work, and particularly look at employers, right? So we had Gen X, which looked at more safety, security, stability as very important aspects. And we have Gen Z, which looks at more quick learning, quick growth, instant results, and also a sense of purpose. So it's very important for them to know, why am I doing this? What is the larger picture or the larger objective, right? And we have millennials somewhere in the middle. So it is definitely challenging for business and HR leaders to be able to provide these different aspects to each of these generations. And the best employees will be the one who are able to cater to each segment in a holistic way.
Yeah, since you touched upon the fact, John, that now the challenges lie in managing different kind of generations that are kind of joining the workforce today. How do you think are the expectations of these different generations changing from their employers, especially when it comes to their career and development journey?
Yeah, so like I said, Gen Z will probably not have the same kind of patience that we are used to from the earlier generations, right? They're going to want to see growth. They're going to want to see, how am I learning? How am I growing? How am I learning something, right? They're going to be less tolerant of hierarchy as a generation, right? And they'll want a lot more autonomy and a lot more freedom to be able to achieve outcomes than we are used to from earlier generations, right? So these are some aspects that we all need to factor into the way that work is divided into roles, work is divided into KRAs, KPIs, processes, and even from a learning input perspective. Therefore, the question is not only about how do we get Gen Z to learn well, but also how do we do the advocate learning inputs for their managers, right? People who are already millennials today or people who are Gen X, so that they are also able to adapt to the changing expectations from the workforce.
Interesting. I think, as you said, the challenge and the opportunity both lies in the fact as to how do organizations, leaders, HR leaders revamp their policies and their infrastructure to match these different generations. Ichsan, what are your views? What kind of changes have you seen in expectations that employers are having from their employees are having from their employers today?
Yeah, I think I would just echo what John was saying earlier, right? I mean, I think there are generational differences in the workforce. I think that, if you see, I think the average, I saw somewhere there's an average tenure of different generations. I think the younger you get, actually, the average tenure is actually getting shorter. Yeah. And I think that's a trend that's going to go, into the future. And definitely younger talents, they will see purpose as the company's purpose as something that is important, and they need to buy into that purpose. But then I think on the day-to-day basis, they would like to be able to get the best experience out of the job, to make sure that they get the right opportunities. They can see that there are growth in the opportunities. They're given platforms where they can showcase their abilities, and those are, I think, the kind of things that the companies are trying to do to built into the talent development. And on the flip side to that, I think what John was saying, I think I also echo, like there is a lot of pressure right now on leaders and managers in companies, right, to be able to manage the workforce differently than they were before, right? When we are in like late 40s or maybe even 50s, the expectation is different and the way you manage people are different. Like 20 years ago, right now with a lot of social issues also getting into the workplace, like things like DEI, right, and well-being and mental health and things like that. That actually forces managers and leaders to equip themselves with new type of skills, so that they're able to manage this different workforce.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting because the generations that we have in the workforce today are pretty clear about what they expect out of their employers. Their purpose is clear. It's about us as business leaders, our HR leaders, to create those hyper-personalized journeys for them, matching each person's expectations, aligning it with the business and the organization's goals. I think that is where the role of leaders is becoming all the more important, because that alignment that is needed with the employees' expectations, their need for purpose to the purpose and expectations of the employer, that's going to be the way forward. So great thoughts, Ichsan and John, on that. Ichsan, I'd now like to ask you, what do you think are going to be the top 3 skills? While there be many, I'm sure, in the list, but what will be the top 3 skills that will define the future of work?
Yeah, I think there are if you think about skills, I mean there are multiple levels, right? But I think in general, to me, I think the data analytics or analytical thinking, depending on what field you're working on, I think it's getting more important as we capture more data, right, from customers down to all the different processes within the company. Yeah, it's now required for any position to be able to gain insights from the data that's available. If you can even get it from external the company. I think second, what is to me are getting more important is the interpersonal communications, right? Because as a manager leader, as I mentioned before, you need to be able to really manage a diverse workforce, a hybrid and sometimes remote workforce, right? And not to mention, I think organizations are not getting more hierarchical; they're more getting more delayered, so to speak. So more flatter organizations require you to be able to collaborate across functions and across levels, and this forces people to be able to manage interpersonal communication so that collaboration happens effectively. I think the third one, to me, it is creative thinking or structured thinking, because innovations are needed in companies to be able to outperform the competitors. And this is something that I think still quite lack of talent in the market. It is competitors competing with each other for these kinds of skills. Yeah.
I think those are very critical skills, Ichsan. Totally agree with you. John, would you like to add on to the kind of skills which will really power the future of work?
Yeah, so for me, the top 3 skills, like I've been saying, would be empathy, data, and digital, right? So the empathy piece is about, so a lot of people think empathy is a very HR subject, right? It's a subject for people from the HR and L&D team, right? And it's a soft skill, right? But I would want to frame it very differently, because I think a lot of the work that we are doing in our organizations are for our customers and for multiple stakeholders around us, right? So empathy is very necessary to be able to step into the shoes of those stakeholders before we decide what we can do for them, right? To really understand them, understand their lives, understand their perspectives, that becomes very important. And I would echo with Ichsan on the importance of data and insight, right? I think everyone's been talking about the importance of data and insight. But I've seen that this is one skill people really, really struggle with, right? What do I want from the data? What data do I want in the first place? and what do I want from the data, right? These are two questions that people don't ask well enough, right? So a lot of us start seeing that there's a lot of data flowing in, a lot of data flooding in, and then we are a little bit lost as to what we are going to do with this data, right? It becomes very difficult to zoom out of the data and then understand what we want from it, right? So that becomes a very necessary skill. When it comes to digital, the fact that everything around us is being dematerialized, right? We are moving from physical to digital, and therefore the way of doing business, the way of collaborating, the way of communicating, everything is becoming dematerialized, right? So how do we adapt to that, and how do we leverage that for more effective and efficient outcomes, right? So all these become very critical, right? The last point I want to touch upon is, I think Ichsan mentioned about creativity or creative problem solving, right? Now, one of the barriers that you come across today in the space of creative thinking is that our education system typically trains us to have what we call convergent thinking, right? Which is basically saying, what is the solution to a problem, and how do we narrow down a solution from multiple options, right? What the education system today is not very good at is to help people do divergent thinking, which is basically about how do you create different options in the first place, right? Or how do you, first of all, arrive at what is the problem statement in the first place, right? So divergence is more about the questions you ask than the answers you give, right? And that's not a skill that people are really used to learning, right? Most of us are learned to solve problems, solve equations, right? So the thinking is always convergent, right? And what happens is that you end up, you may actually end up solving for the wrong problem, right? Or you may arrive at maybe a local optimization rather than a global optimization in the solution that you're providing. And therefore, the solution is not as effective as it otherwise could have been, right? So again, for the talent management function, how do we help people move, understand how to oscillate between divergent and convergent thinking becomes very, very important.
Great. Thanks, John. Thanks, Ichsan. I think from what I capture from both of you, when it comes to the top skills that will power the future of work, it's going to be a mix of human and tech and digital. I think that's going to be interesting because while data and digital skills are required, we also require empathy, creative thinking. So that mixture, I think, is going to be very important, and organizations need to build on that very, very strongly going forward. Finally, Ichsan, I'll come to you with my final question for the interview. How do you think, and how are you at your organization solidifying the learning infrastructure to develop and nurture the existing pool, and also making them more future ready while creating a culture of continuous learning?
Okay, I think for learning infrastructure, first of all, you need to have the data set that you want, right? And then I think this is something that all the companies are moving into cloud, and they're putting in themselves systems such as the likes of Workday or SuccessFactors that would be able to capture all the data that's needed. But what I see is that I think many companies are still evolving in terms of the maturity of their data capture, because right now I think for our true learning, power that you will need a more richer data for you to get the insights on, right? You need to get data at the skills level in addition to just the individuals. So data capture is one, and I think the second one, I think, is the curation of learning, because I think the old days where training departments, they create their own materials from scratch, they find trainers, and it takes months and months to develop. But right now, I think there's a lot of material out there, providers, and you need to be able to capture all these different learning, pockets, and make sure that they are curated in different ways that are suitable to any particular need in the organization. Right now, I think that's where the technology is moving towards, and how that will actually fit with the changing demands of the business itself, right? So you need to learn at just in time with the right skills, and then you need to match that with the people who need them. So within the data and the curation, that needs to go hand in hand, so that we can deploy the right people with the right skills at the right time. And I think the third one is the platform of the learning itself, right? That if you just put learning materials on what they used to call portals, right? Portals are becoming out of date because they have too much information in it. So it's not, people are not going to log in and then they try to find their way into the portal. You have to have platforms where you can match the needs with the skills, right? So if you know what skills this learning will actually develop, then they will find the right individuals that need them, and then they will pop up in their homepage, so to speak, so that people have options and they can see what are the probably the learning that is more suitable for them, or for the the next project that they will go to. So these are the three things, I think, the learning infrastructure that's going to power the learning development in the future.
Great, thanks, Ichsan. Would you like to add to that, John? How do we create that kind of a really solid infrastructure for learning, which creates a workforce for the future?
Yeah, so I would frame it in 3 words: personalization, immersion, and integration. Right. So these are 3 very key words in terms of looking at what kind of learning infrastructure is required for the future of work. Right. So personalization, like Ichsan mentioned, is about how do you ensure that people get learning that is relevant to their skills, for their current roles, for their future roles, and not only skills, but also their proficiency level in those skills. Right. So that is number 1. Number 2 is the whole aspect of what we call immersion or real life experiences. Right. A lot of learning content today is very passive. And the expectation probably is that you watch a video or you read out from slides and then you develop skill, right? And that's definitely not going to happen, right? Will you be able to play football better just because you watched a football match? No, you will never be, right? You have to play football to learn football, right? And that's the same thing when it comes to skills, right? You have to get your hands dirty, and you have to actually do things relevant to those skills to start developing those skills, right? And that requires platforms where they put you through real life experiences. They give you quick real-time feedback, and they give you nuggets of conceptual learning. So today, a lot of platforms have a scenario where 90% of the learning is conceptual and maybe 10% is application oriented, right? But you actually need the exact opposite. You need 90% of practical application oriented environments and maybe 10% of concept, just to help you navigate that environment better, right? So that's the immersion aspect. And the third part is integration, which is about making learning available where the learner is, right? Rather than expecting the learner to go to where the learning is, right? And this is easier said than done, because our employees today are on so many different platforms. They may be on Zoom, they may be on Teams, they may be on Google Chat, they may be on Google Meet, they may be on Slack, WhatsApp. So there are so many different places where our learners are, right? Yeah. And ideally, we should be able to bring learning to them where they are. At the same time, we should be able to make, learning never happens in a very cluttered and crowded environment. Learning happens in a more distraction-free environment where you have the chance to reflect, right? So being able to achieve both integration and reflection together is not easy, right? But that is what the learning infrastructure of the future needs to do, right? So I'll summarize it as personalization, immersion, and integration.
Great. Thanks, John. Thanks, Ichsan. I think what I gather from the entire conversation today is, yes, that the workplace and workforce have changed and will continue to change. The kind of expectation that employees have from employers have to be aligned with the kind of purpose they want in their career development journeys. And I think it's all about personalization. How do you personalize an employee experience? How do you personalize their learning journeys? How do you identify the right kind of skills? How do you create context for them? How do you make things relevant for them in order to prepare them for the future? So on that, these are the workplaces and leaders which will lead the way going forward also. So thank you so much, Ichsan. Thank you so much, John, for joining us for this episode. It was a great conversation. I learned a lot from the both of you and look forward to many more such learning interactions with you in the future as well. And I thank you once again for joining us. Take care and bye-bye.